All right. Good evening, dear friends, to what is first of hopefully many, many events here at Touro University. We are at the center of Manhattan, which is really the center of the Western world, and we're here to discuss very important issues, but we intend to do that on an ongoing basis. So you guys will receive many more invitations to similar events, but today is the inaugural event of this series. Yes, as long as they're not like your cousin and myself, suspected Houthis. I'm now a suspected Houthi. Wherever I go, people say, you look like you're from Yemen. So first of all, I'd like to express my profound gratitude to the leadership of Touro University for doing this, and of course, in the first place, President Alan Kadish, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here. But the university, which is the fastest growing university in our part of the world, and now has 21,000 students, several medical schools, several campuses, an incredible success story, is represented by two top leaders of the university. We have the Dean of the Graduate Business School, Dean Marie Laure, standing right there. She is a dynamic leader of the business school and really the hosting department of tonight's event. But President Kadish and Touro will be represented tonight by our esteemed provost, Professor Pat Salkin, who's here to deliver a few words on behalf of the university. So please, Provost Salkin.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome everybody. And I just want to thank the ambassador for, one, joining Touro University, and two, developing some terrific programming for all of us. And so we look forward to seeing you and others at many more events. So as you know, my name's Patty Salkin. I'm the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and the Provost for the Graduate and Professional Divisions. I joined Touro in 2012 as Dean of its law school, and then became the Provost in 2016. I wanted to just take 3 minutes to give you the elevator pitch about Touro University, because many people didn't know that we were here, and many people still haven't heard of Touro University, which is surprising. You know, we're not as old as some of the older institutions of higher ed that have been around since the 1700s. We're only 53 years old. So when we started 53 years ago, we were on 44th Street in Midtown Manhattan, and we started with 20 students. Rabbi Bernard Lander was our founding president, and he was our president for about 40 years. Alan Kadish is our second president. So he's been with us for about 13 years now. And in that time, in 53 years, as the ambassador said, what separates us from other colleges and universities, besides the fact that we are the largest university in the United States under Jewish auspices and possibly in the world, we started with 20 students, we now have almost 20,000 students in 7 states and 4 countries. And it's been amazing growth. Part of our sweet spot is in medicine and healthcare. After the University of California and the University of Texas systems, we are the 3rd largest graduator of medical and healthcare professionals in the United States. And many of our other programs, including our business school, have programs within business in healthcare management and in data analytics with a healthcare bent, and in cybersecurity and AI with a healthcare bent. That doesn't have to be just healthcare, but we have that option to complement what we're doing. Even the law school this year created an institute for health law policy and bioethics. So it just shows how the university comes together. But our Graduate School of Business also has finance, has accounting, has real estate, has entrepreneurship. You name it, we have it. It's a really great program. I encourage you afterwards, if you haven't met our dean, to speak with her, because we would welcome your involvement, your advice, and engagement, not just with the university as a whole, but also specifically those of you that are interested in the things that the business school does. But there is a place for all of you to volunteer, to give us your advice and your input, and I am grateful for the new friends that we have tonight in the room, so thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Provost Solkin. And you know, we gathered here to discuss something that is not really the forte of this department, but nevertheless, because we had such a great opportunity to have such an incredible guest, we decided to host this here at Touro. So we gathered here tonight to learn about Iran, and let me introduce the person that we're going to learn from, Dr. Nazee Moinian. I've known Nazee and her husband Joe for many, many years. She holds a PhD in political science, specifically Iran studies, from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. She's an adjunct fellow in the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and completed 2 master's degrees, one from Columbia SIPA School, and the other also from Columbia, from the Graduate School of Arts and Science. She advised presidential candidates on Middle East and Iran. I won't go into names not to create any controversy in the audience. And she is often being interviewed on foreign affairs. She's a published author, and as I mentioned before, one of the most knowledgeable as well as charming experts on the Middle East, because we usually, when we think of Middle East analysts, we always think of angry people arguing, yelling. We were just talking about one of your guests, Dr. Motke Kedar, who's famous for his fireball energy when he talks about the Middle East. But Nazee is soft-spoken, knowledgeable, and an incredible guest to have. So this is how it's going to work. We will welcome Nazee to the podium, where she will present a few slides, and then we will engage in a conversation and then open it to your questions, okay? So, without further ado, please welcome the esteemed Dr. Nazee Moinian.
Good evening. Are you sure you don't want to take the first 3 chairs in the front row just because they're empty? Anybody wants to come up? No? Okay. I guess it's easier to sit back there. So I think we've stared at this first slide long enough to see the wonderful neighborhood of Iran, neighboring countries, how stable and peaceful they all are. Worst of them, of course, is Iran. But also a point to look at is the borders of Iran. You see it's craggy and jagged, and it's not straight lines the way it's between Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Syria. That's because these are the proper borders of Iran. They have been like this for over 1,500 years after the Iranian Empire shrunk to this size. And Sykes-Picot Agreement that basically divided the greater Syria never touched Iran. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. It's 92 million people. Their estimate is anywhere from 88 CIA fact book to 92 by Iranians themselves. The average age is about 34, the median age. 70% of people are between the ages of 15 to 65. They have about 15 years of education. It's a sophisticated country. 99% of the people are internet connected, and they have 1 or 2 mobile devices with different phone numbers. So in case one shuts down because of blockage by the government, they can rely on a different number. This was the empire I spoke to you about before, that it stretched from Eastern Bloc, Eastern European, all the way to India. This is Cyrus the Great. We know him because of our tourist studies. The great Cyrus who emancipated Babylonian Jews and told them to go wherever, built the second temple. I don't know how factual that picture is, but this is the cylinder of Cyrus. It's called the First Human Rights or Bill of Rights, where He gave everyone the right to pursue their own God, their own rights. They had the right to own property, they own cattle, regardless of any confession or religion.
What year?
This is 2,560 years ago.
Is there writing on there?
It's writing in cuneiform, yeah. The replica of that is in British Museum, and it went on a 10-year traveling tour, came to America. It was in Metropolitan Museum. This is the remnants.
Wait, so it's after destruction of the first temple, and he gave the Jews the right, if they wanted to,
Yes,
build a second
yes,
temple?
yes. And it was discovered in Iraq. At the time, it was part of Iran, the greater Iran. It's small. It looks very big, but it's not bigger than this size. This is the palace of Cyrus the Great and Achaemenid Empire. Just for the sake of scale, when I stand, I visited this place many, many times with my family. If I stand in front of the base is as high as I am now. So you can imagine how immense these pillars were. This is Reza Shah. So I know we really jumped 2,500 years forward. Excuse me for that, but it's a lot to cover. He is the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty, if that name rings a bell, because it was Muhammad Reza Shah Pahlavi who was toppled in 1979. He's the father. He took over from the Kochar dynasty. It was a decrepit, a very backward-looking dynasty that basically went away at 1925 when he became the Shah. He had only a fourth-grade education. He was a contemporary of Kemal Ataturk, and between the two of them, they wanted to lift Iran and Turkey out of poverty and superstition and modernize the country. That's Ataturk that I was just talking about. This is what Iran looked like during the Qajar dynasty. The women of harem, this is the harem of the Shah, the last Shah. There were 1,000 of them at one point in the harem. If they had come forward in front of the chair, I know this is not very scholarly, but I thought you should know tidbits about what Iran was before the Pahlavi dynasty. They were wearing large pantaloons, but over the pantaloons they were wearing a tutu. Because when Nasruddin Shah visited Paris in 1883, he went to visit a ballet, fell in love with tutus, and ordered the women in the harem to all wear tutus. And the women were mortified, so they all put the tutus over the very big, large pants. I don't know if I have a picture of it. No. This is Mohammad Reza Shah. This is the son. That's what the women looked like in 1915. And this picture is in 1921. I'm sorry, 1941. This is the picture of his first marriage to Queen Fawzia. These are some of the interior. This is what Tehran looks like now. In the background, you see the Alborz Mountains, snow-capped mountains. This is used to be the palace of the Shah of Iran. Now it's turned into a museum. Some historical sites. This is the 2500th anniversary. Some of you may be familiar with this. It was called the Ball of the Devil by Western media, petrodollar ball by other Western media, because the Shah had the audacity to celebrate the 2500 years of the imperial dynasty of Achaemenids and the Sasanians. People from all over the world. They were invited and they came. This is the coronation. The little boy in the middle is now 64 years old. He resides in Washington, D.C., and he's called the Crown Prince. So if on your X feed you see that people are asking for Reza, the Crown Prince, it's this little boy here. So this is important because people don't know about this one. The Shah of Iran was Western educated. He spoke French much better than he spoke English when he came to Iran at the age of 15, to be that by his father's side. He was educated at Le Rosé Institute in Switzerland, and he had a very Western demeanor, and he identified more with the French culture than he did with the Iranian culture. He had to be re-educated to be an Iranian. And Napoleon was a favorite of his, and in this scene, he came here to visit the JFK and Jacqueline Kennedy in the White House. On the outside, it looked very amicable, but JFK and the Shah of Iran were no fans of each other. Many times JFK tried to undermine the Shah was not happy with him, tried to dismiss him many times, but in this scenario you will not be able to tell, but there are CIA directives or CIA policy prescriptions from 1960 or 1961 that actually advised JFK not to get too cozy with the Shah of Iran, because if he fell, it didn't look good for America to be supporting an autocrat. Here's another picture. Here's Gerald Ford with the Shah, amicable, they were good friends. The best friends with Richard Nixon. They understood each other. There are archives that the two of them sat down and spoke for hours about Vietnam, and the president listened to the Shah of Iran about Vietnam, and the Shah of Iran actually sent troops, Iranian troops, to help the Americans in Vietnam. And he had a delivery of F-14s that were supposed to be delivered to the Shah. Nixon calls him and he says, do you mind if we take over your F-14s because we need fighter jets? And the Shah of Iran accepted. So they were delivered to Nixon instead of the Shah until later. The Carter presidency, Carter is known as the president who lost Iran. It was under his watch that the revolution happened. That needs its own panel, as you can tell. I don't know if there's a single Iranian ever that has any good words to say about Jimmy Carter. I would say it's merited, and at the same time, there are a lot of factors that we Iranians didn't even know ourselves until recently, that Carter supported the Iranians and the Shah, but failed. The Shah had a special love for the Queen of England, and the Queen of England never took a chance to snub him. Lyndon B. Johnson was a good friend of the Shah, and then this is a duplicate, more pictures of Nixon, of JFK, of Eisenhower. Kissinger and the Shah were very, very good friends. I had the fortune of putting the Shah and the Shahbanu, not the Shah, Kissinger and the Shahbanu, the Queen of Iran, together for dinners many times. And I have to tell you, it was a joy to watch them talk to each other. They were like two little children, reminiscing about the good Iran. The Iran Air was the national airport. This is what the Iranian women looked like in 1960s and 1970s before the revolution happened. I'm going to go through this quickly. My own mom was a medical doctor. So women were in all fields, fighter jets, Olympics, and Andy Warhol came to Iran and painted the Shah and the Shahbanu. Some of the, this is the famous dinner in 1978, December of 1978, when Jimmy Carter came to Iran a year before the Shah left and toasted the Shah of Iran for having created, and I'm quoting, an island of stability in the Middle East. And it went downhill from that speech. The Shah leaves on January 16. People take to the streets. Women wanted the Shah out, but as soon as they rallied around a republic, I want to say, they were told that they need to be covered up. So they marched in huge numbers against the hijab, to no avail. The numbers that turned out in support of the Khomeini's return were big. Here are women chanting in support of Khomeini. They didn't know what was there to come. A sea of hijab. This picture is rudimentary. It's really just to show you that, you know, we went full circle from 1910 to 1990s. A period under the Pahlavis that were, you know, Iran was very Western-oriented, forward-looking, part of the modern world. This is 2009, the Green Revolution, where they were chanting, "Where is my vote?" when Ahmadinejad came back as the president of Iran. He was the president of Iran from 2005 to 2009, and the elections were rigged. This is Raisi. Raisi is the one who got killed in the helicopter accident last summer. The butcher of Iran, I know. I welcome that news, and I know as Jews we're told not to be happy with anyone's demise. I could not be happy. This is Mahsa Amini, the Kurdish woman who stepped off on the platform, train platform in Tehran on September 13. She was bludgeoned. She went into coma. She died on September 16, 2023. This is another picture of her. And women came out in support of her. Unfortunately, this very same girl was killed like a half hour after this photo was taken. She was shot by a bullet in the back of her head. None of these people are no longer alive. They're all victims, and you see how young they are. This picture is here because Tipman is a paintball gun that is sold by US companies to Iran. So the Iranians took the gun and fitted it with bullets instead of paintballs. Actually, I had, in a hearing, I had this picture, and the senators that were sitting around the table were shocked. More protest pictures showing their hair. This is Roya Pirai, whose mother is here. She became a friend of mine after her mother was killed. She's now living in London. She's going to school. She cut her hair off, and I don't know if you can see the hair. She's holding her hair in the other hand on her mother's grave. These two women took off their hijab and ate breakfast. A day later, they were summoned, they were prosecuted, and they were sent to prison. We still haven't heard from them. We don't know where they are. These are some of the artistry work that was done after Mahsa Amini got killed. The football team of Iran had a kind of a signal that they were cutting their hair in support of the women movement, women life freedom movement. More. This is in Berlin 2 years ago. About 300,000 people supported this rally, the Germans, the French, the Iranians, everyone. I was there. These are more protests. And this iconic picture on the cover of Time magazine. This one is in Los Angeles in support of women life freedom. And this one was in New York, right here around the corner. And I think I'll stop right there. This is the Iranian parliament, so we can speak about that and more of the same pictures. So that's it for now. I don't know how to turn this off. Can I give it to you?
Well, thank you, Nazee, for sharing this really almost stream of images that comes together to form a collage in our minds of the past and the present of Iran. And there's a big question which we will discuss about the future. But as things usually begin, let's start with your upbringing in Iran, because we all have, especially us Israelis, that were attacked by the Iranians for the first time in history. We were directly attacked by the Iranians twice, in 2024 in April and then again in October of 2024. Between the two attacks, over 500 ballistic missiles and drones were fired. And so we have this image of Iran as a demon. Tell us about your upbringing in Iran.
Is it on? I think it's on. Okay, so it's. Okay, you want me? Okay, yes, sure. No. Can you hear me? Yeah. So it's funny because as I was in a car coming here, I said to myself, you know, I've studied for this presentation / interview as many data points and numbers as I could. Just wanted to be ready in case it came up. But I really did not go back to my own childhood. I did not refresh my memories, so I should have done that before I sat at this chair. I left Iran in 1979 when I was 15, so you can do the math. I left with my mom and my brother. My sister was already here, and another sister was at Pratt Institute doing a master's in architecture. So I don't have one of those stories that I went through a mountain pass on top of a donkey and a horse, and I was given pay for dinner. It was very easy. I sat on a plane. We landed in London, and then I think we switched planes and we came to New York with my mom and my brother.
So as far as you can remember, and
Yeah.
certainly because you speak the language and you can read Farsi, in hindsight, were there any warning signs that you can recall?
So yeah, I was going to say that. I grew up in a country that did not treat me any different than its other citizens. And I say that understanding that it's hard to relate to. It was a Muslim country after all. But one of the pillars of Reza Shah, the founder of Pahlavi dynasty, was to weaken the hold of the Islamic power on the Iranian people. The narrative, the superstition, the self-flagellating. He closed mosques, he changed schools to theaters, he forced the Iranian women to leave their hijab home and come out with their heads uncovered. And many Iranian women refused to come out of the house, including my own grandmother, who was Jewish and who was raised under hijab. But that was his call to duty, to make sure that Iran is part of the Western world. So I grew up with a sense of everything is possible for a female. My parents were very modern, very educated. We were 4 sisters and a brother. We were all educated. My brother ended up being a brain surgeon. So I did not experience anti-Semitism. It's not to say that my parents didn't. My parents did. So the inflection point for my father was when we were comfortably ensconced in our apartment in a wonderful neighborhood in Tehran, residential, upscale, beautiful area. We heard the calls of Allah Akbar. When the sun would go down, people would come up to their roofs and chant Allah Akbar, and then others would reply from other roofs, Allah Akbar. The difference that night was the person across from our apartment in the building across from the street where we lived in that was chanting Allah Akbar was one of our best friends. She was the sister to Iran's most famous actress. She was westernized, wore mini skirts, wore her hair long, wouldn't leave the apartment without makeup, spoke French and I want to say Italian as well as she did Farsi. She was one of the people that went up on the roof and chanted Allah Akbar. And at that moment, my father turned to us and said, there is no longer any room for us. We need to leave. And I appreciate that kind of resolve. I really do. I think I would have been a terrible Iranian woman. I probably would have been shot if I had stayed in Iran. He just, the next day he went to black market, he bought plane tickets, he made sure our passports are correct, and he sent us off and he said, you guys go, I'll come join you later. And that was, honestly, I think because my parents were exposed to anti-Semitism, they were, thank God, given these extra antennas that went up with those chants. And we left.
And I think it's a wonderful example of the DNA of the Jews that really kept them alive, throughout history. Your father sensed just by, it was his DNA speaking also. Yeah. He sensed that something tectonic is about to happen. It's an incredible story. Great management guru Phil Kotler said, he said, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And what he meant by that is that Kemal Ataturk or the Pahlavi dynasty, they can come with plans to introduce secular lifestyle, they can come with plans to liberate women, they can come with strategies to introduce culture, but at the end of the day, the culture of the people will overcome the strategy, the planning. And the question is, what can be done in your, or let me put it this way, what do you think was wrong or was inadequate about the strategy that was introduced to the Iranian people? And you beautifully showed us that slide of the women that went from 1910 to the 1990s, the full circle of them really going back to the burqa. So what do you think could have been done in your assessment differently to avoid that meltdown?
In other words, what should have been done not to have a revolution?
Or to, to have the foundation of democracy built in a different way, more resilient?
Well,
or openness?
Yeah, I understand the question. I'm not sure if the answer is as forthcoming as we want it to be. What's the reason that Iran went through such an unpredicted surprise revolution? To us, it was really overnight. I don't know if we have an answer still to this day. There's so much scholarship on this, and reasons are various. I just know that Iran had a semblance of democracy, but it wasn't a democratic country. And the reason I showed you those pictures is, don't forget where Iran came from. It was a glorious dynasty. It was a beautiful empire, rights for everyone, property ownership for everyone, practice your religion, but it went through a dark medieval ages also. And we had the Safavid dynasty that brought Shiaism back to Iran, not back to Iran, but they adopted Shiism as the state religion. That looked good because Iran went through a Renaissance period of art and architecture. Almost every beautiful mosque you saw was from the Safavid era. But it also instilled a sense of victimhood in the Iranian population, a sense that nothing really matters because they have no agency. It's Allah that decides all. I think we will come to answers and questions because, should I take a question now? Or should we wait until?
Yeah, let's wait with.
What is Savak in the Western countries robbing the country? And they hated Savak.
Yes, we will get to Savak also. Yeah. I know it's a. I will, but I'm about 400 years behind Savak right now. But I will get to that. That's a good point. Thank you. So this doctrine of victimhood, it's the word that you hear now on the college campuses, that was instilled in Iranian society, basically allowed them to have monarchs from Safavid on that did not serve their public. They served themselves. They served themselves. They were frivolous monarchs. The Qajar dynasty is a good example of that. They lost a lot of territory under Qajar. Most of the Caucasus that you see, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, they were all part of the Iranian territory. They were ceded to the Russians in two treaties, humiliating treaties of Golestan and Turkmenchai, 1813 and 1828. So Iranians didn't know better. There was no institutions to talk about democracy, allow them to vote. There was no popular mandates. So when Reza Shah came in, he had inherited this 123 consecutive dynasties. I know democracy is a new conception, even in the Western world, but for sure it's not something that Iranians were comfortable with. They were comfortable with a monarch, a parliament, a devoted nationalistic rhetoric, and that kind of paved the way for Khomeini to take over, because Khomeini also was anti-monarchic, but also one person who basically told the people, don't worry, I stand between you and mayhem, the way the Shah of Iran had. So democracy was not part of our language. So what could have been done differently if we had known that 1979 is going to happen? I mean, if I were the Shah of Iran, I would have opened up the political space. This is easier said than done, but there were a lot of Iranians that had left Iran on the dime of the Shah of Iran. The Shah had supported them financially and structurally and allowed them to basically get trained, educated in the best universities around the world. Yale, Princeton, MIT, Columbia, Oxford, Cambridge, Sorbonne, these are all places that the Iranians left their homeland to get educated. And when they came back, they wanted to be a partner to the political system, but they were not. They were an appendage. So the Shah of Iran basically created this middle-class civil society that wanted more from him, and he was not ready to deliver.
Let's move forward to today. So what we have is a country, what you mentioned, 92 million people, sizable economy, sizable military presence. We know they have successfully cultivated many proxy organizations in the region. But would you say, if you had to prioritize the list of adversaries that Iran is dealing with, how would you build that list in terms of who's on their agenda?
The better question, Ido, is that who's not on their agenda? Just to summarize it, if you ever don't remember an Iranian proxy, you can just pick any H, because they all kind of start with the letter H. We have Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the HTS, and Harakat al-Adl from Iraq. So the Iran is practicing imperialism on the cheap. They send out the proxies, they train by the IRGC. IRGC trains these proxies, we fund them, we give them moral and material support, but they don't, I don't want to say we, I'm not part of the system. The Islamic regime does not like to leave fingerprints. There's, before October 7th, and even sometimes during October 7th, Ido, when we weren't sure if Iran is involved or not, there was a group of people that insisted that Iran wasn't involved. Iran wanted to sit back and enjoy the fruits of everybody else's labor, and death, by the way. So it's not, I don't call it axis of resistance. To us, the Iran watchers, it's axis of ruin. Anywhere that the Islamic regime has gone, it has left destruction and death behind. The immediate proxy of the Islamic regime has always been the Hezbollah. They were there from the very start, even when the war between Iran and Iraq was raging on, between 1988. They were as early as the return of Khomeini to Iran, not quite 1979, but definitely in 1980. There were people from the Islamic regime in Lebanon trying to recruit and finance militia in support of the Islamic regime and against the state of Israel. So I want to dial this back a little bit, because I want you to know that having Israel as the little Satan and America as the big Satan is not accidental. These two words have been in the sermons of Khomeini, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, since he started railing in 1960s, 1963 to be exact. That's the year that he was exiled out of Iran by the Shah, because he considered these two impure entities, America and Israel, to have usurped Muslim lands, subjugated Muslims, and they're trying to replace the pure, peaceful Islam with the Western liberal world order. So if you read through Khomeini's writings and sermons, which I had the displeasure of doing because of my dissertation, and it's not easy reading. He wrote in Farsi, he also wrote in Arabic. There are passages from his sermons that read exactly as the Hamas Charter of 1988, word by word. So I haven't gotten to the bottom of this, but I'm sure the people around the table that wrote the Hamas Charter of 1988 were Iranians or were inspired by Iranians.
Right. So what you're describing is a picture where the big threat to the regime is the very idea of modernity, right? Because of
Right.
liberal ideas and
West.
so on. The West, then of course the United States is the big Satan, Israel is the small Satan, but they also have regional agenda. They want to achieve regional hegemony, and we know that they had the fantasy of letting their proxies, you know, inflict harm on Iran's enemies while they don't really risk their people. Well, Israel turned the table on them, didn't they?
Yeah,
Israel turned the table on them
and they continue to do so.
in a big way with the help of the United States and even with the help of Saudi Arabia
And Jordan.
And the question is, and this will be the last question before we will turn this over to you, so think about questions for our expert.
I know
So
you're
the question is, if you had to give advice to decision makers, whether in Israel, the United States, what would be your main advice going forward when Iran is more or less cornered by the actions of Israel and the United States?
So cornered is a good word. I want to paraphrase our president's words when he was talking to President Zelensky, is that he was telling him, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. And I wish he had said that to the Iranian regime operators, because the Iranian regime doesn't have the cards. Regardless of the bluster, we will see you with your head rolled off on the ground, wait until your last day. You know, everything that Salami and Ghani are, the virulent messages they're putting out there against the Israeli and American commanders. Iran is on its back foot. It's not on its back yet. But, you know, slowly and surely, they are losing their capabilities. You know, I learned in one of my courses, in one of my degrees, there is a formula in foreign policy for military, is that threat is equal to capabilities times intention. So threat, the big T, is equal to capabilities, C, times intention, I. When the capability becomes smaller, the threat becomes smaller. That formula is not static, it changes. So in Iran's case, the intention has always been there. Since Khomeini's writings were recorded in 1960s, to replace the Western-led liberal world order with an Islamic caliphate. But the threat keeps diminishing because the capabilities are diminishing. And we see that Hezbollah is greatly weakened, Hamas is greatly weakened. A year ago, none of us would have believed that Assad, Ismail Haniyeh, Sinwar, who am I missing? Nasrallah, Daesh, will be no longer with the living people. And they are. And think of where we are now and how when the Islamic regime operators, the head of IRGC, Salami, Ghani, they're sitting around the table. What are they thinking? Who are the commanders that are going to replace Qasem Soleimani, who was assassinated in 2020? Sinwar, and all the other ones. These are monumentally important people for a terroristic regime that operates from the brainwaves of a few rogue actors. They write the plan, they put it in operation, and the foot soldiers carry it on. They are gone. That's good news for freedom-loving people, not only for Israelis. Israel is holding the front for the Western world. And as sooner the Western world realizes that, the more secure will Israel feel that its efforts are not for nothing. I believe it to my core, Ido, that any idiots on the college campuses here in New York, across the world, anyone who is in support of Hamas or Hezbollah or wants to relive October 7th has no idea that this is the propaganda that the Islamic regime of Iran thought of in 1970s. And to put that in context, we just celebrated Iranian New Year, Nowruz, and there is a tradition within Iranian society that the monarch gives a Nowruz Salam, which means the State of Union address. So the Shah of Iran did that for decades. When Khomeini comes in power, his State of the Union address was for the Ministry of Propaganda. He went there, he saluted everyone, he sat with them, and he honored them, basically saying, your work is as good as having phantoms of swords. You are the head of the spear. You spread the word. Don't sit on your hands. Write as many things as you can, because propaganda works. And he finished by saying, God willing, you'll be successful. I have tried it myself, and look what I've done. He meant to the Shah.
Yeah, that's a very profound insight. And by the way, as someone who's in the forefront of the academic, in the academic arena, I can say to all of you that care deeply about Israel that my experience has been that this is an anti-American sentiment first, before it is an anti-Israeli sentiment. It's an anti-American, because those kids, I just had in a different university, I had a student that walked out of the class angrily because I praised America. Not because I said something good about Israel. I praised America. And this student walked out angrily. But thank you so much for this incredible overview, really, and for being so honest and candid about your own upbringing in Iran. And you deserve a big round of applause. So if you can just state your name, because this is one of the purposes of this is also to network. So Nathan Lowe, I stated your name for you, please.
Thank you so much, both of you. Ido, you mentioned that culture eats strategy. So, Dr. Moinian, if the IRGC goes away and the Ayatollahs go away, what is the culture of Iran? And does it become not a democracy but a Western friendly? Or does it stay with the hijab, or does it move west? What's the sentiment of the people?
That's an important question. Thank you, Nathan, for asking it. So I'm going to bring some data points in, because data doesn't lie. There is a polling organization in Netherlands. I'm saying Netherlands, but I'm not sure about this. Somewhere up north. It could be Sweden, actually. That's called Gaman. For those of you, if you want to ever go back and Google it, it's Gamaan. That they just did a poll within the Iranian society. They polled 77,000 Iranians anonymously. And they asked them specific questions about the durability of the regime, the likability of the regime, the strategies the regime is implementing. So out of the 77,000 people, about 80% of them, and I'm rounding the numbers up, are anti-regime. So they could have lied, but these are anonymous pollsters. And they want the regime gone. They don't think it reflects their values. Iranians are very proud nationalistic people. They love their culture and civilization. They don't consider the regime Iranian. They consider it an imposed, I have nothing against Arabs. My best friends are Arabs, as they say, but they consider it an Arab regime imposed upon them. And they're against hijab. So, you know, if you come from You come from that place where you say to yourself, my God, these people that are sitting in the parliament and around the Security Council and Khomeinis and Khamenei's and all the other ones, they don't look like me. They will want to be part of the Western world. They already want to be part of the Western world. Actually, Henry Kissinger has a good saying that, Iran, well, he has two great sayings about Iran, but I'm going to use the second one, that no other two countries in the Middle East could be better suited to be friends than Iran and Israel. They're non-Arabs, they're forward-looking, they come from great civilization, they're sophisticated people, and they have the same enemies. So that's what the Iranian society is. I have no hesitancy to say that if and when this regime topples, the Iranian people will take back the country they used to know. So that definitely does not include the hijab. But what are they exposed to? That's a great question. Will they know democratic values? Are they ready to be part of a society that is open to the world? We shouldn't conflate their wish with their competency either. I know what they wish for. I don't know who's the competent leader that could lead them to that. Obviously, we have the Crown Prince. He's a good friend, and he's a wonderful person. But as a leader for the next Iran, I'm not sure.
Yes.
Doesn't
Go ahead.
this make another part of your very good question? What I'm hearing you say is the Iranians want to embrace the West,
Yes.
but the West is going through a wrenching transformation now. Some people I have to believe towards an authoritarianism which is shocking in its speed and its potential impact. So if the 70 or 80% that say we don't support the Iranian regime, we want to embrace the West. I just came back from Washington where I was in a conference on the loneliness epidemic because of the technology's impact on youth. If this is what suddenly is introduced to Iran with its young population, the consequence of that, and that's where religion suddenly rises to fill a vacuum. So it's not as easy as just toppling a regime. I'm sure you don't think it's easy. How do you bring these two pieces together of where the West is going and where Iran hopes it can go?
Your question is a good one. It's a what if kind of a question, and I can answer you how I see it. It's almost like there's a stranded, lonely person in the desert, and he's dying for a drink of water. And you're asking me, well, what if we give him the drink of water? Will he be able to swim in the ocean that's 30 years down the line? I'd rather him drink the water first. I'd like Iran to be liberated, and whether the West is part of the authoritarian system, will be part of the authoritarian system, that remains to be seen. But the Western values that are known to be beacons of freedom, freedom of want, freedom of speech, human rights, again, property ownership, women's rights, I don't see those values changing that quickly. I can see how the political structure of Western countries can shift one way or another. And even in this country, there's a pull and push between the US as a beacon of human rights and democracy, and then there's the realist school that says, wait a minute, we care about human rights, but what about US first? We have to take care of our own country. We have to make sure that enemies don't devour us. So the pull and push will not go anywhere. It's been around for as long as United States of America has been around, and I don't foresee that to go anywhere anytime soon either. And I'm hoping that the liberation of Iran will happen way sooner than we're stuck into any kind. We're stuck in any kind of a mud about authoritarianism.
Yeah, by the way, David, your question reminds me of people asking me what's going to happen in Gaza. And I said, well, as long as they create or reach some sort of a livable arrangement where they don't kill us and we don't kill them, that's good enough. Let's not talk about peace. Let's just talk about, let's not kill each other. And I think that's what you're looking at Iran. It's not going to be a Western-style, liberal, pluralistic democracy. It's going to be a regime that cares about the people. That's the least that we can ask for. A regime that cares about the Iranian people, doesn't want to kill them. That's the minimum that you can ask for. Yes, please, Sherry.
Sherry, yeah.
Sherry, and then Bill, and then who's Betty, please.